Good morning and welcome to the Ask Weldon Show, episode 180. We hit a nice round number, which triggers me, by the way, because I don't like round numbers, but what do I want to say? I don't like even numbers. 80 happens to be an even number. Anyway, here's the show. Today we have questions. We have 4 questions. I might not get through them all. I put the 4th one there just in case we burn through questions 1 or 2. But basically, we're going to talk about artificial flow state. We're going to talk about having one computer for essays and homework and video games and how conflicting that can be. We're going to talk about getting laid off. Thank you for this deep question, or this, I would say, dark question that we have for number 3. And although it's going to be very uplifting, of course. And then the bonus question, which you'll find out what that is about when we get there. My name is Weldon. This is the Ask Weldon Show. I am a sports psychology trainer, and I coach mainly professional esport athletes, particularly from League of Legends. I'm also a League of Legends coach, and this is the show where you ask me questions on anchor.fm/Weldon Green. All one Weldon Green, W-E-L-D-O-N, green like the color, and then you can call into my show. So you basically hit the plus audio message button, also favorite my station, and lift your phone up to your ear and drop your question right into the audio chat, and I will play it on the show and answer it. Right now we have 2 questions in the tank for tomorrow, so I need everybody to get on the horse and start dialing that phone. And I say dialing like facetiously because obviously we're using apps now. We don't actually use phone numbers to call people, but whatever. You get the point. No updates really on my end from personal life. Apparently, TSM lost. I just woke up, kind of rolled over, turned on my phone, turned down the brightness, and then it was like, TSM CG 1-3. Oh. So I'm going to make a vlog about that later. I won't talk about it much here. I haven't watched the VOD yet, so I don't know what happened. I feel bad for the guys, and I'm really excited to dig into the loss with Mike Young, because losing is one of the best ways to grow and to learn, and I'm super excited about that. So yeah, let's get into the show. Question number 1 is from Max.
Hey Weldon, it's Max. So today I had a question on flow state and kind of the way you were talking about it in the Mac program. So whenever you were talking about like how you can get into flow state kind of unnaturally, not when it just kind of happens, you said you kind of like you focus on like everything and not just in game, kind of around you as well. And sometimes when I try to do that, it's a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes it feels like I'm focusing on too much and then I'm not able to focus on the game too much. Anyway, you can help me out. Thanks. Bye.
All right, so really good question. So essentially, you can think of choking as the opposite of flow state. So flow state is essentially an open awareness where you're perceiving all of your sensory experiences and then still able to make correct decisions and focus on the game or the performance. Choking is often thought of as blinders, where you are like a horse with those blinders on, and you're not seeing the things that are actually important, or you're avoiding them in some way. And so because you're not perceiving everything that you need to, and you are manually controlling your muscles, you're underperforming. So artificial flow state, meaning it's not really artificial flow state, right? But it's a state of mindful sport mindfulness, a high awareness in sport. And the idea is to play with like less of blinders. And so Max's question here is, when I take the blinders off and I'm trying to focus on extra stuff, I find it difficult to focus on the game. So first of all, that's normal and natural. And when you are trying to expand your, essentially, the things that you can focus on, it's going to overwhelm you at first, because the way that the brain operates in terms of patterns is that we can hold, think of your brain like a computer, okay? You have random access memory, and it's 8 megabytes. So you can hold 8 things in your random access memory. I don't know if it's 8 megabytes, but anyway, it's 8 things generally, statistically, if you're an average human. And so the way that the brain copes with this capability of holding a limited amount of information in our like conscious focused brain is by turning extra information into patterns. So when you look at a mini-map, you don't see everything on the mini-map. You see that you're about to get ganked because you recognize a pattern. When you see pros in League of Legends flipping open the item screen, you know, they're not looking at every single item. They're seeing the patterns, and their brain is just automatically deducing it from the patterns that they see. And it's storing it in the same way in long-term memory. So essentially, you have to push through a more open awareness and trying to see more stuff. So for example, one of my favorite things is when you are getting ganked and you're trying to think of the 2v1 or the 1v2 and you're trying to outperform the gank and kill both of them. And so you're trying to take advantage of all the information, and you're going to underperform at first because you're opening your awareness to everything that's happening on the map, lane situations, your jungler, their jungler, all the minions, you know, and then you get hit with a skill shot point blank. And you're like, oh, I should have just been focusing on dodging the skill shot. But you don't want a tunnel vision because you want to be able to do all the other things as well. And the way that you do all the other things is you first fail at doing all the other stuff, but you force yourself to keep paying attention to all of it until you can actually do it. So that's kind of like, there's a process here. Now, secondly, I think that your perception will narrow down to the stuff that's essential. People who are interviewed about flow state in qualitative research talk about how they perceive a lot of extra variables for sure, but they don't perceive everything, and they perceive things that are relevant to the task. So task relevant focus. So I think that your perception will narrow down to only task relevant focus cues, but you don't know what those are and you don't have a choice over what those could be. So you start by trying to open up as much as you can and just pick up everything. And two of the most important things are all the visual information and all the sound, and your body position and your body movement. Okay, those are the three most important things in terms of like what to open your focus or attention to in order to try to have optimal performance. And then from there, you can kind of let your brain sift through and be like, okay, I don't need to pay so much attention to my feet. Maybe it's my shoulder position. I don't need to pay so much attention to sounds, in the room. Maybe it's just the sounds from the game. Okay, I don't need to pay so much attention to the wall behind the computer screen. Maybe it's just things in the game, and my fingers. So I think that you should let experience narrow it down, and you should try to force the other way to the openness end and fail kind of forward in that direction. So that would be my recommendation. That is my experience with it, and it's really hard to talk about other people's experience with it because although I've coached this and people describe it, what are you really experiencing and perceiving in your brain, and how do you communicate that to me is a very difficult kind of thing to understand. So yeah, I would just say don't experiment more and find out what you think of it as you move forward. But definitely it sounds like you're doing it right. So don't worry about it being a little bit like lowering your performance at first. Lose first to win more later. All right, next question.
Hello, Weldon. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for great content. And then
you're welcome, Fabio.
I want to ask you
Fabio,
a question. I have this problem that I have to do some things for school. For example, write a text on the computer, but I only have one computer, and on this computer I also have my video games. And when I try to get this text done, I sometimes end up playing video games instead. So how can I improve on this? Thank you.
All right. Well, I mean, the obvious solution is to just uninstall the video games and problem solved. But I have the same problem. I have some things on my phone that I like to use for reading. And then I also have all my social networks on my phone. So basically, I never get any reading done. And the best reading I get done is when I just have a book. So one of the things you could do is, for example, I have a separate gaming computer. And I know that's not possible for a lot of people, but that computer cannot run games and is a laptop, so I just take it over there. One of the best possible options could be to get a Chromebook, for example, where it literally is just for writing. Like, you can't do anything else with it. It can barely surf the internet. Actually, that's not true. Of course, it can surf the internet amazingly, but you can only write on it. The other thing you can do is just unplug the internet or turn on internet dead zones. So it forces you. Of course, you can't use any resources while you're doing that, so that's painful. But it's questionable whether you should be distracting yourself with resources anyway when you're trying to get into a creative mode of writing. That's more like an editing and a research point of the writing. When you're actually doing the writing portion, you kind of want to just be in your own head assimilating the data, which you should have on your computer in the form of PDFs anyway. So those are some really practical suggestions. To pick up a used Chromebook from somewhere. You can get really old used computers that can't do gaming, and set up a workstation. You can unplug the internet for some time when you decide that you want to work on something. It's actually quite freeing, because you're like, well, I can't do anything else for the next 2 hours. And all you have to do is make a deal with a friend to like not get the internet plugged back in, right? To keep yourself honest to it. As far as those are the hacks you can do. As far as then mental training, that's a lot more difficult, because you're asking me to tell you that you should use it in order to up the difficulty of you writing the essay in order to train your resilience. However, I suck at that myself. So of course I can't recommend that you do that with a clean conscience. And also, I don't think that you want your growing mental toughness to stand into the way of your successful career and your successful schooling. So I would use different training scenarios to kind of like push on the limits of my mental resilience and mental toughness and grow them that way. I wouldn't necessarily use my success in life as the place where you want to dabble with increasing your resilience. So I think that hacking solutions are actually quite profitable in this realm. And at the same time, you can have days where you're just like, no, I'm feeling super motivated and I'm super amped and I really think I can focus and I'm just not going to play the video game. And that can work for you. Generally speaking, this is centered around motivation, right? If you have incredibly high motivation for the essay, you're not going to escape into a game. You're going to be like so involved in that, you don't even think about it. It's going to be more fun than playing the game. So the question here is like, how do you stay disciplined when you're not motivated? And the answer is, you got to be in touch with what you value. So you got to be in touch with like your long-term plans and how your values of how it is that you live out today are connected with eventually what you're going to get out of that. So yeah, that's the non-hacking way, and that is a much more of a challenge. And if you're failing at that, start with the hack and then move towards mental toughness after. All right, third question.
Hey, Weldon. It's me, the guy who had the heavy question about growth the other day. I was just laid off yesterday, and so now I have a whole lot of time to choose the direction that my life and my job and my prospects go forward. And I'm realizing that it's a great time for me to really try the Mac program because I have lots of time. And I was wondering if you have any advice besides follow the Mac program, which I will be doing. Thank you. Bye.
All right. First of all, man, bum luck. You are not having the greatest time, the greatest few weeks ever. That's for sure. And I think all of us who are watching this are empathetic towards you and hope that things take a turn for the better. And they will. Trust me. Life does not. Although bad things do come in threes, so be ready for number 3. But or maybe you already had number 1, and that was leading up to the one that you called in on. But yeah, hang in there. You sound like you are a very positive, upbeat, and like roll with the punches guy, just from your tone in the questions and the way that you phrased everything. So I hope that amazing positive mentality you have carries on. And I really admire you for it, by the way. I really admire you for the strength that you've shown in the way that you've asked the questions and the way that you've had an outlook on what's going on. So advice for when you just get laid off. I would 100% recommend getting a podcast MBA. So I think that one of the most important things that I ever did was discover the online internet business instructionals of Pat Flynn and Gary Vaynerchuk, essentially. They're like my mom and dad in terms of the online MBA for how to run a online business. And I think that if you go way back in Pat Flynn's podcast, you can listen to a lot of the guest series that he has, where he interviews people who have successfully started online businesses and from a wide variety of different structures and niches. And those are the most fun to listen to because they open your eyes as to what is possible to succeed at in online business right now. And the second thing that I would recommend then is to consider the internet. Because the internet is basically changing the way that we are employed, and it's taking out the middleman in every single way. Like my dad, who used to have to work through a company and who's retired now, is all of a sudden, his own contractor, because he can access the vendors who need his specialty on the internet now, and they can access him. And so there is this world in which you have a specific skill set or passion that meshes very well with an online community with which you can all of a sudden be making a living, because now the internet allows you all to be connected and allows the infrastructure for supporting and monetizing that passion or that knowledge or that asset that you have. So consider getting an internet company MBA from podcasts, and consider definitely the internet and explore things that you are passionate about, things that you have some sort of knowledge or asset within, how they could be used to create your own independence in that way. Okay, and then the second thing is just apply for insane amounts of jobs. So the 2 times I was unemployed, I applied for tons of super interesting jobs and random stuff I got hired for both times. So I think that just like it's a numbers game, absolutely 100% a numbers game, and you should not ever for a second doubt or hesitate when you're filling out an application in terms of like, am I qualified for this, blah, blah, blah. You literally just spam out applications. You write cover letters. You adjust the cover letter for every single employer to really sell yourself hard, and you worry about the appropriateness of the job when you get to the interview stage and you're talking to them and you ask them all about the job and you really see if you're a fit there, but you don't analyze that on the internet when you're looking at the job listing. You just, if it sounds cool, you apply, whether or not you think you're qualified or not. Obviously, you don't want to do things out of your wheelhouse. Like, this requires a doctorate and you have a master's degree. Okay, well, so maybe don't apply to that, because it's a waste of time. But everything else, just apply, and the opportunities that you'll get are commensurate to the number of doors that you're going to knock on. That is my recommendation. All right, last question. Before I dive into the last question, I do want to talk about the Mac program that he was referencing in his question, which is, yes, we're going into an ad now, and it does seem callous after Cody's amazing question on the show, but I really do appreciate him talking about it, and I do want to let you know about it because this is how I support the development of the new version of this app, version 4. All of the money right now is going to the developer, and I'm funding it week by week, essentially. By the way, the budget, I think, is honing in on to be $10,000 for the full development. So it looks like we're going to come in really affordable in terms of the development of an app, which is crazy because I think most apps cost a lot more money. So anyway, this is my online training program. It's the course that I worked through with pretty much every pro team that I've ever worked with. CLG, TSM in 2016. G2 kind of worked through this because they were already together for 6 months before I even came and started to work with them, or 3 months, half a season. So it was a little different situation. So I was adapting the content. Also, I was only an assistant coach, and of course Mike Young, who were only part of the way through this program right now. But the basic premise is, it's an online video training course. It's 47 videos. It takes you through the concepts of mindfulness, acceptance, commitment in like a spiral fashion. You deal with all the concepts and then you get deeper on each of them. And mindfulness being awareness of what is driving you, your internal states, the things that tilt you, the things that choke you. Acceptance of learning how to essentially let those pass so that you become a surfer riding your internal states instead of somebody who's trying to build up a brick wall to stop the ocean, which is never going to happen. And then commitment, which is the discipline part. Now you get to the part where you're like, okay, so I know these emotions are occurring inside of me and I know what I want to do. So then how do I get over the hump of just choosing to do that instead of obey my emotions and tilt? And that's what this program is all about. And it's a combination of a lecture plus a mindfulness training session every day for 40 days in video form. You buy access one time, you get it for life. Even if I upgrade the program, even if I put out a new app, you will just get grandfathered in as a beta user and hopefully give me feedback before I change the pricing structure toward a subscription, because apps obviously need maintenance and update. And you will not ever have to pay a subscription fee if you're in under the wire on this third version of the Mac program, which I first published in 2015, I believe, 2016 in the fall or summer. So when this one launched. The first 2 versions were my first iterations and attempts at this. And the third one I think is the best so far, but it's definitely going to get way better in about 8 weeks. So use the code AskWeldon for that, by the way. The code is AskWeldon. It gets you the $5 discount. mindgames.gg/MAC is the URL. And the 100% guarantee sticker you see over here is basically satisfaction guarantee. Obviously, I'm not saying this is going to work for you, although I do have quite a lot of hilarious comments from people whose lives have changed from this. There's over 1,800 sales already in the last 3 years, or 4 years, 5 years. How long have I been doing Mac? 5 years, I think. And but what I'm saying here is that the purpose of this program is to fulfill my own purpose within esport, which is amateur development, and to make esport useful instead of a waste of time. And so I'm not that interested in the money, short-term or long-term, and just supporting myself as I am in the success of the program, which means if it's not a good fit for you and you ask for a refund, I just give it to you. It doesn't matter if it's been 5 years or 1 year or 1 month. If you want your refund, you can just have it. So 100% guaranteed satisfaction, because if you're not satisfied, you just get your money back. Last question, guys.
Hey Weldon, a few episodes ago you had talked about the idea of being frustrated versus being on tilt, and how you can use frustration to actually help you. I've dealt with a few frustrating scenarios since hearing that and tried to use that emotion but ended up tilted instead. Are there any mental strategies or practices you could suggest to keep those emotions in check? Thank you very much.
Okay, so Jared asks basically a question which we kind of would delve into if it was the Mac program. We would delve into it with the same kind of philosophy, where essentially you have emotions and they're driving you. They're called internal states, and they're the things that drive your behavior, and that it would be things like frustration or anger. And how do you turn those into either motivational pieces that allow you to fuel disciplined action instead of tilted action? So instead of the wrong thing, you do the right thing. Or how do you just like accept them, let them ride, and do the right thing that you want to do? Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, if you don't know the right actions, it's hard to modify your behavior. So you're being driven by an internal state, and you know what you want to do to satisfy that state. If you're frustrated and angry, you want to rage at your teammate. Maybe because you've raged at your teammate a million times and you know that that's what's going to satisfy you. So your body knows that. You don't necessarily know what you want to do instead when you are frustrated and angry. So what you need to do is you need to build up your playbook, your repertoire, your manual of different actions that your committed self takes. So you should think of the scenarios that you often tilt, and you should sit down. Okay, sit down right now, take out a piece of paper, think of the scenarios where you often tilt when you have frustration and the things that you do, okay? And then ask yourself, if I was the best possible version of myself, or if I was the best possible human being that I could ever emulate or envision being, what would I hope that I would do in these situations, independent of emotional state? So given the situation that is happening right now, like I die in a game, what would the best version of myself, like that people talk about at my funeral, like what would I want them to say? I've died, and they're talking about how I acted when I died in a video game, but I've died in real life, and they're at my funeral talking about this. Like, what are they saying about how amazing I was and how I acted? So what is like the core philosophy of humanity and compassion that you subscribe to, and describe that physical behavior, not how you think, not how you feel, but literally what you say, the words that come out of your mouth, and the actions that your physical manifested body takes, okay? Real world stuff, not invisibles, okay? Actual behaviors. You can only control what comes out of your mouth and what your hands and fingers and arms and body do, and a little bit what you're concentrating on. Mostly, you can really control what you're concentrating on. You can't necessarily control what you think, but you can do self-talk. So you can counter or argue with yourself about what you're thinking. Okay, build up that manual. So these are the committed actions, right? And then the rest of the equation is just motivation. Sorry, that's a complete lie. The rest of the equation is not motivation. The other thing I want to talk about is motivation. If you have super high motivation, you will find it much easier to do those committed actions, those valued actions, instead of the tilty ones, the ones that will satisfy your internal state. So essentially, you're in a low motivated state over doing this thing instead of the other thing. I really want to go to the gym right now, but like, because I know that that's what I want, but I'm just not going to because I'm not that amped up about it. Okay, so the thing that I want to get from the gym is not as important as just going over and chilling with YouTube and eating cereal and playing with my kids this morning. So I'm not going to go to the gym. So if you want to do it in the face of an absence of motivation, you need to structure your values around it and rely on essentially prioritizing the actions that you want to take. And the thing that I recommend most of all is something I stole from Transcendental Meditation, which is essentially to have a mantra. So I have a phrase that I say to try to hype myself up and also to keep myself disciplined for pretty much every situation. So I know what actions I want to take. I know the barriers I'm going to face emotionally. I know, you become very familiar with it, and you know the hurdle and the answer that you want to hear based on this like reflective introspection that I'm asking you to write, this manual, this journaling of like, how is it that you would want to be seen, when you die in these moments. And by the way, you can do this as a worksheet. It's called valued goals. And you really got to connect the values to these ambitions or these goals, and values being like the tangible how you do something instead of what you do. And there's a worksheet I made, mindgames.gg/LAN goals, that I actually used at the player development conference in Mexico for Riot Games. So I turned it into a Google sheet, and then you can do it too, because it's just there. It's a Google sheet. I think it mails you the results, but it takes you through the steps that I went with them to help them set valued driven goals. And then you just get really familiar with that particular barrier, and you start to overcome it in a disciplined way by making a choice instead of allowing yourself to be pushed in a direction by emotions. So you got to get super serious about that one moment. Like, tackle it tilt by tilt in terms of like the framework in which you tilt, and really address it and really go deep on what you want to do otherwise, and why that's important to you, and how it's connected, and just like spend a lot of time justifying that and figuring it out. And don't make light of the work the silent, quiet, vulnerable, brave work that you have to do right now in exploring like the ideal person that you would want to be in that position over and over and over again. That work is necessary and valuable for you to start to hook up and wire up this disciplinary action on yourself. So yeah, that's my recommendation, is enter into the situation a lot more and fail. That's going to happen, but also you need to be preparing for it a lot more and seriously. Mental preparation is often like heralded by elite performers as like the most important aspect for their success. And certainly in all of the research we've seen, mental characteristics are the determining factor for success at high levels of performance, at getting to become a high-level performer, more than physical attributes. More than physical attributes predict becoming an elite performer, mental attributes predict becoming an elite performer. And people take seriously the idea of being mentally resilient and having all of these skills, but they spend almost no time on mental training in comparison to physical training and training of tactics, training of like the body and training of strategy, which is a weird conundrum if you think about it. It's a weird irony, because it turns out that like the mental skill set is what is actually the defining factor for success and the most important thing. So spend a lot more time training this moment than you're spending now in terms of like preparing for it and preparing your actions for it and preparing your values for it and for yourself. And this exact moment, I don't mean like broadly in general, I mean like very specifically, and overcome that hurdle. And when you do, the things that you have learned, because you're approaching it in a systematic manner through the MAC program, hopefully, the things that you have learned will transfer and apply to other areas or other difficulties, because you are approaching it with a system instead of just throwing yourself at a wall over and over again until you happen to succeed at it. So then you know what you did to make it work, and you can take that mental resilience and move it forward. So that is my suggestion, and that is the show for today. Thank you for the call-ins. Thank you, Cody, for the the real depth that you've taken us in the last 2 questions that you've had. I'm really sorry for the things that are happening in your life. I hope that things turn around. I'm glad that you're turning to this community that's supposed to be one full of positivity and assistance and help. So hopefully you find some of that here. You guys give a shout out to him. Join us on Twitch if you want, Cody, and come into the chat. We can dig into stuff deeper if you like. Twitch.tv/MindGamesWeldon is where the show is live, by the way. So if you ever want to come and hang out before and after the show, I'm about to head over to Twitch chat right now and address all the questions that they came up with during the show. It's a really fun environment, and I really recommend that you check it out. And yeah, talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.